All right, welcome to our webinar today, everyone. We appreciate you taking the time to spend with us today. My name's Robbie Wright, and I lead the storage product marketing team at AWS. And I'm excited to be with you today to share about some of the things that are new in AWS storage, and we've got a ton to talk about. And so we're going to focus today on a recap of the things that we launched in and around AWS reInvent this year, so lots of new stuff that we can discuss. So in this next hour, I want to, or thereabouts, I want to walk through the AWS storage portfolio and how all of the different components fit together to help you address your biggest questions. So things like building a data lake or optimizing your storage costs or designing for disaster recovery or active archive, as well as you'll likely be wondering how to even get started and how all of that data might make its way into the cloud. So we'll talk through all the different options. We'll talk about several new ones that we just announced, and then we'll give you an idea of where you can go and learn more about some of these offerings. So let's get started. All right, so AWS has been helping customers on their cloud journey for almost 13 years now, since the launch of Amazon S3 back in 2006. And we've helped customers like Netflix that built their entire infrastructure on AWS, to General Electric, who moved 9,000 applications from on-premises into the AWS cloud, to Pinterest, who started from the very beginning on AWS and continues to build on top of it today. And that's why AWS storage is so broad and deep. It's feedback from over a decade of use at scale that drives 90 to 95% of our roadmap. And we've learned a lot, and I wanted to share some observations about the adoption patterns and the way that customers typically come into AWS and how they've had great success. So there are three typical modes that we see customers join AWS in. They are rehost, replatform, and re-architect. Let's talk about rehost first. So rehost is typically what a lot of us will call lift and shift, where your workloads are typically delivered on virtual machines and they migrate as is onto AWS. It's a good way to get some quick wins. GE didn't start moving to the cloud by saying we're going to move 9,000 applications. GE started their cloud journey with an aggressive tops-down goal of moving 50 applications in 30 days. When you take a strong leadership position like that, your organization will find a way to get those quick wins. So one of our recent customers, Lionsgate, decided to move via a lift and shift type of operation their SharePoint and SAP deployments to AWS. And they were able to reduce their time to deployment from weeks to days or hours. And that kind of quicker turnaround has been a win for their IT department and opened a lot of doors to additional workloads moving from test and dev and all the way into production in AWS. And using AWS has allowed them to avoid investing in a new data center, saving about $1 million in 3 years. They estimate that AWS is going to save them about 50% over a traditional hosting facility. Now let's talk about replatforming. Replatforming is a means of lifting an existing application to the cloud and adopting bits and pieces of the new AWS platform to change that application in some way. In the database world, for example, you could spin up EC2 instances, install MySQL, and then migrate a database. However, you could re-platform by using our RDS service at AWS and letting us manage that database for you. In the storage world, what that means is taking an existing application that depends on an underlying shared file system or something similar, let's say something that maybe an on-prem network attached storage device is supporting, and moving that over into an AWS managed service like an Amazon EFS or FSx for Windows, which we'll talk about here in a minute, and using other capabilities like the AWS Storage Gateway. And then finally, let's talk about re-architecting. Re-architecting is basically building your application to take full advantage of AWS cloud services. This also applies to any new application that you're writing today. So there's no reason that you shouldn't be writing your applications in the cloud. You get the advantages right from the start, all the elasticity, all of the flexibility that you can gain from the cloud is built into your application if you build them in the cloud. But it's also game-changing for existing business-critical applications. And many times this is a way that companies use to modernize applications that you've been running for years. And it's fairly common to use all of these different platforms, this rehost, this re-platform, or re-architect together when you're charting your course and your journey to the cloud. So we don't only have this breadth of services, but we're also adding more services, and we're adding additional depth within each of those services. So if you've been paying attention recently at AWS reInvent 2018, we launched 2 new file storage services in Amazon FSx for Lustre and Amazon FSx for Windows File Server. We also launched a number of new storage classes. So if you're familiar with Amazon S3, you know that we have 4 existing storage classes: an S3 Standard, S3 Standard IA, S3 One Zone IA, and S3 Glacier. But we also launched an S3 Intelligent-Tiering and S3 Glacier Deep Archive. That one is a pre-announced that will be available soon. And we added a new infrequent access storage class to our Amazon Elastic File System service. So let's jump into those a bit more and unpack what's new within AWS storage. So I talked a second ago about Amazon FSx for Windows File Server. This provides a fully managed Windows File Server that's easy to effect a lift and shift for business applications that are dependent on that Windows file system to AWS. So many of these applications rely on SMB, and some of the key things that are important about this are that we're providing you all of the native Windows compatibility. So you get native Windows file storage that you can access over SMB that supports the Windows file system features that you're using for your applications today, and it works seamlessly with Microsoft Active Directory. You also get really fast and flexible performance. You've got an FSx for Windows file server is built on SSD storage, and it provides fast performance with per file system throughput of up to 2 gigabytes per second. So that's tens of thousands of IOPS and consistent sub-millisecond latencies. Similar to EFS, you can pick throughput levels, and you can do that independently of your file system size. Performance can scale up to tens of gigabytes per second of throughput across hundreds of petabytes of data using DFS namespaces. We've also built this service to support even some of the most demanding enterprise applications. So Amazon FSx provides the features, the performance, and the security that enterprise applications like ERP, CRM, custom .NET applications, and home directories rely on. And it provides the throughput, the IOPS, and the consistent sub-millisecond latencies that are needed for those enterprise workloads. We also made it broadly accessible from a number of different platforms. by supporting the SMB protocol, you can connect your file system to Amazon EC2, to VMware Cloud on AWS, Amazon Workspaces, and Amazon AppStream 2.0. And with Microsoft Active Directory support, you get integration into your current Windows environment, and the DFS replication supports your multi-AZ deployments. FSx also supports creating multiple different file shares for each file system across multiple instances. And then finally, we built this service to be simple and fully managed. You would typically have to worry about software updates and patches. We do all of that for you in this managed service. And you also don't even have to perform backups manually. In minutes, you can create a fully managed file system with automatic backups using the AWS Management Console, CLI, or the AWS SDK. All right, now let's talk about another new file system under the FSx brand, and that is Amazon FSx for Lustre. And that's a fully managed file system that's optimized for compute-intensive workloads like high-performance computing, machine learning, media data processing workloads, and the like. And those kinds of applications typically require the high performance and low latencies of these scale-out parallel file systems like Lustre. But running those requires specialized expertise and administrative overhead. FSx for Lustre can process massive data sets at up to hundreds of gigabytes per second of throughput, millions of IOPS, and sub-millisecond latencies. And we've built Lustre for seamless integration with Amazon S3. So it's really simple to link these long-term data sets that you're storing in S3 in your data lake with high-performance file systems to run very compute-intensive workloads. So all it takes is just copying that data from S3 into FSx for Lustre, running those workloads, and then writing the results of the processing back to S3 for retention. We also enable you to connect to your on-prem data stores if you're not using S3 as your data lake, and give you capabilities to do that as well. So if you use Amazon S3, you know about the different storage classes that we have available to you, and we have a lot of customers that use those different storage classes very effectively. And the most common ways that customers leverage some of the less expensive storage classes like S3 Standard IA and Amazon Glacier, S3 Glacier, is using S3 lifecycle policies. And the way those lifecycle policies work is that you can set a policy that after a certain period of time, after the object create date, that lifecycle policy automatically moves data into a less expensive storage tier. And we've also given you capabilities to determine how to set those lifecycle policies, like S3 storage class analysis, that gives you an idea across a particular data set at what point you should be setting those policies based on object age, so that you're actually optimizing your storage spend and not moving data too early or too late. And so using those two features together works really great if your data has predictable access patterns. You can just write a lifecycle policy, it moves data into the deeper storage tier, and you don't have to worry about it. But many of our customers have told us that they have data with changing access patterns. Maybe access frequency cools off for a little bit and then heats back up when you run a big analytics job on data that's sitting in your data lake, or some other use case might require that data to become more frequently accessed again after it's been moved down to a more cost-effective tier of storage. So we created S3 Intelligent-Tiering to help with that problem. That's a new storage class that automatically optimizes storage costs for data with unknown or changing access patterns. And we built this using a machine learning model to train the S3 Intelligent-Tiering algorithm to make sure that we're moving data at the right times. And S3 Intelligent Tiering is now the first and the only storage solution to provide this dynamic tiering in the cloud that makes it super easy for you to optimize storage costs. So we use a smart monitoring and an auto tiering capability that we've built to automatically move that data between a frequent access and an infrequent access storage tier for cost optimization, and those are priced similarly to the S3 standard and S3 standard IA storage classes. You don't have to do anything from that point. You write data into the S3 Intelligent Tiering storage class, and it cost optimizes your storage for you. And one of the key differences here is that whenever your data, if your data moves into that infrequent access tier and then becomes frequently accessed again, we will automatically move it back to the frequent access tier with no retrieval costs for you from that infrequent access storage tier. And again, no retrieval fees involved here. So you don't have to worry about unexpected bill spikes when the data access patterns change, because we automatically are promoting that data back up for you. And so now let's turn our attention to the other end of the storage spectrum. Let's talk about file storage. So we've heard from a ton of customers that they are hungry to move their file system workloads to AWS. And we've had the opportunity to understand the many use cases and applications that they're running. In addition to applications, customers are using EFS to store things like backups or log files that they don't access very often. Other customers upload shared documents or raw data for immediate analysis. And these files generally see frequent activity right after upload with a really significant drop-off as they age. And in those cases, our customers still love the durability of EFS because that data is super important. But because the data isn't used all that much, they're less concerned about speed and performance. And a lot of times these customers move this data into a lower price storage option like an S3 storage class, but that takes some work. Sometimes you have to actually transform that data in order to move it to another storage service, and that adds complexity and time. So customers can build scripts and workflows to automate some of this, but most prefer an easier way. So we announced EFS infrequent access, and this will be available in early 2019. There are three major reasons why we think customers are going to love EFS IA. The first is it's going to be up to 85% cheaper whenever you're storing files in EFS IA than it is in the EFS standard storage class. So those files that are accessed less often, you can save a ton of money on storage for them over EFS standard. The second thing is it requires no application changes. So if you're using EFS today, you can take advantage of EFS IA without changing anything about the way your applications work. When you create a new file system, you simply enable lifecycle management, and EFS takes care of the rest. And when you enable lifecycle management, EFS automatically moves those files that are not accessed for 30 days from that standard storage class to the EFS IA storage class. So we're excited to see how customers are going to use this new storage class and the lifecycle management for EFS for even more of their workloads. We've also heard from customers, especially those with large data sets that they want to retain for a long period of time, that they wanted to get out of the business of hosting their own tape infrastructure. Some customers use Glacier to get rid of that tape infrastructure. But we've seen customers across all industries, particularly specific verticals like oil and gas, that still use tape to store large amounts of seismic data for the lowest cost retention. And they're doing that on-prem and perhaps sending some of that off-site to a third-party facility. So for those data sets like that seismic data that oil and gas generates, or long-term retention for any data set, maybe things that you're required to maintain or to retain, but you only access every few months or maybe even every few years, is tape still the best option? Tape capacity is cheap, but it carries a lot of operational costs. Then after you've done all of that work to maintain that tape infrastructure, restores can actually be really hard. It might take up to 2 to 3 tapes, and sometimes days or even weeks if you're pulling some of those tapes back from off-site to get a good restore of your data. Most of our customers just don't have patience for that and would like a better way. So that's why we created S3 Glacier Deep Archive. And Deep Archive gives you a super low, an ultra low cost of less than 1/10 of a cent per gigabyte a month. And that comes with with many of the things that you're used to in S3 today, particularly things like 11 nines of durability. We also have the resilience in all of these S3 multi-AZ storage classes of a minimum of 3 availability zones. We do all of this. It's another fully managed service that takes all of the burden of managing that tape infrastructure off of you. And we manage everything that you need for long-term retention, including periodic data validation, fixity checking, and the assurance that you need that your data will be there when you need it, tomorrow or 30 years from now. So you get an even lower storage cost than tape with none of the hassle. And with Glacier Deep Archive, you'll be able to recover your data in hours. So no longer do you have to wait days or even weeks to get a full restore and without any errors. You can recover your data in 12 hours, as little as 12 hours with Deep Archive. So your data is an asset, but it's only an asset when you can actually afford to keep it around and when it's actually valid and there whenever you go back to restore it. So the innovations that we've brought to market in S3 and Glacier have really set the standard for storage cost efficiency. We're still innovating on our storage services and within those storage classes across our entire portfolio. So we're bringing new features and functionality that make it super simple and that bring you the performance capabilities that you need, make it easier for you to move data in and out of AWS and manage data that lives in AWS. Now let's talk about data management. This is an area where we've invested significantly at AWS because we have a lot of customers that are operating at petabyte and even exabyte scale. So we've developed storage management capabilities like object tagging to help you organize your data. We've created inventory reporting to help streamline auditing and cleanup processes. And we talked a moment ago about EBS Data Lifecycle Manager that helps manage the cost and retention of your EBS snapshots. Recently at AWS reInvent, we added a lot of new management capabilities. We added the ability to write data directly to S3 Glacier using the S3 API. We added the ability to upgrade S3 restore speeds for restore jobs that are already in process. And we even extended worm protection beyond the S3 Glacier storage class to all of the S3 storage classes using S3 Object Lock. We'll talk more about those and other management features over the next few slides. So another feature that we launched during reInvent was S3 batch operations, and this is now in preview and will launch in early 2019. S3 batch operations is a new bulk management and automation feature within S3 that allows you to, with just a few clicks, manage billions of objects at a time. That saves you significant amounts of time and resources by simplifying that storage management at massive scale. So now with batch operations, developers and IT administrators can change object properties and metadata and execute storage management tasks for billions of S3 objects with a single API request or a few clicks in the S3 management console. No more custom software or scripts are required. And batch operations gives you capabilities that you've never had before. It allows you to replace object tags, change access controls, restore large data sets from S3 Glacier, copy objects from one S3 bucket to another, and even trigger Lambda functions against existing objects stored in S3. And we'll continue to add more capabilities in the future based on your feedback. Batch operations also manages retries, tracks progress, sends completion notifications, generates reports, and delivers events to AWS CloudTrail for all the changes made and the tasks executed. So, for example, if a security administrator needs to restrict access to sensitive data, they can use S3 batch operations to set up one job that modifies access control lists, or ACLs, for millions of objects and refer to the completion report that's generated at the end of the process to confirm that all of those requested changes were made. So managing changes may seem like a small thing when you're working with just a few objects, but when you're managing these large data sets, batch operations is going to provide significant efficiency. So 6 years ago, we introduced the ability to lifecycle data from S3 to our archival storage service, Amazon Glacier. And 2 years ago, we introduced expedited retrieval speed and other capabilities that enable fast restores in as little as 1 to 5 minutes from Glacier. And that's gotten to be very popular. Customers have a lot of use cases for archive storage. For example, storing very large photo or video archives, archiving training data for machine learning algorithms, storing log files, and lots of other use cases. When you're creating petabytes of new data every day, saving time and steps in the process becomes really important. And so this week we've announced several new features that help customers use archival storage in S3 Glacier as an integrated part of their applications. So just as you used to use our put API in S3 to store data in S3 Standard Infrequent Access, or S3 OneZone Infrequent Access storage classes, you can now specify Glacier as the storage class on an S3 put. So that means you no longer need to use S3 lifecycle policies to use Amazon Glacier. You can just write data directly into that Glacier storage class using the S3 API. And furthermore, you can also specify Glacier as the target storage class when you're using cross-region replication. And that means you can now easily configure those replication rules to duplicate data directly into that Glacier archive storage class in a secondary region for a cost-effective backup copy. We also added tons of new capabilities that I talked about a little bit earlier by extending that worm storage, write-once, read-many storage capability across the S3 portfolio. And that makes it really easy for customers to meet compliance requirements. Or we also have a governance mode that allows an administrator to go in and make modifications to retention dates for customers who simply want to use that write once, read many capability in S3 Object Lock as a data protection method. And we've added a number of new capabilities, including the ability for Glacier restores that you've already initiated at a slower speed. Let's say you initiated a Glacier bulk restore that could take 5 to 12 hours, and you decide that you need your data back faster. You can now upgrade those restores to a different tier, like a standard, retrieval or an expedited retrieval to get data in minutes instead of those hours. And then we've added, based on customer feedback, the ability to receive restore notifications when a restore from Glacier into S3 completes, and that allows you to use those notifications to fire off further processes that you might want to take against those objects once they're back in S3. And AWS gives you more data transfer options than anyone else. And the reason that we do that is because we know that there are varying needs for all of these different applications. Many of our customers write directly to the S3 API and just do everything over the internet, but we have customers who stream petabytes of data using Kinesis streams as well as ship in files using the NFS compatible file gateway appliance that we have, and that's designed to live in those hybrid environments with your on-prem data to make it simpler for you to basically re-platform many of those workloads without having to make major disruptions in your environment. You can do large-scale offline migrations with our Snow family, as we've talked about earlier. And this week, we've launched some new options. With AWS DataSync, you have a managed service that combines the speed and the reliability of licensed network acceleration software with the cost-effectiveness of open source tools. Customers can use DataSync to perform one-time migrations. They can use it to distribute data on a schedule, or you can maintain continuous replication between on-premises storage and AWS storage without having to make changes to your applications, without having to build new software, and without having to manage any additional infrastructure. So DataSync works through a pretty simple process. You download and deploy a DataSync agent in your on-premises data center, and you point it at the storage system, probably a NAS device or any shared file system that you want to copy, and then you connect it to your preferred S3 bucket or EFS file system. The DataSync agent pulls that data over from the file system over the common NFS storage protocol, and then uses our purpose-built protocol to rapidly move the data over to AWS using either AWS Direct Connect or Internet links. And DataSync uses the industry standard TLS for encryption and in transit over the network, so your data is secure at all times. And when that data arrives in the destination region at AWS, we perform automatic validation of the data and write it to your S3 bucket or your EFS file system. Of course, it works in the opposite direction as well. So for instance, if you have a workload that requires you to copy videos from your S3 bucket down to your production studio on site, DataSync can do that for you. And for those customers that also want to make files available to third parties, maybe they're partners, suppliers, or customers, we launched AWS Transfer for SFTP. And over the last few years, cloud storage companies have made this swapping of files as easy as sharing a link. But many businesses still rely on the SFTP protocol to securely swap files. So that may be stock transactions, medical records, invoices, or the like with their partners. The SFTP is deeply embedded in business processes across many industries, including financial services, healthcare, and others. And today, many customers run their own SFTP servers on premises, and files collected over SFTP are not readily available for use in AWS. Customers really want to move this data into S3 for durable storage and to use AWS capabilities for data processing. However, these SFTP servers are commonly connected to hundreds of external suppliers, to partners, to clients, and they're moving to cloud-aware interfaces such as RESTful APIs that would require all of those external third parties, potentially hundreds of organizations, to work together. As a result, customers need to build and manage their own SFTP servers in AWS. They need to write custom scripts to convert files to Amazon S3 objects and build connectors with existing authentication systems to maintain end-user credentials. And then they have to manage all of those servers for scalability and availability. And we've heard from customers that you're looking for a simpler way to move SFTP workflows and data to AWS without requiring any of those changes to client software and business processes, or managing and scaling SFTP infrastructure so that you can take advantage of the cloud. So we want to make it easier for you to bring your applications and workflows that depend on SFTP to AWS, and AWS Transfer for SFTP helps you do just that. And finally, we launched a new addition to the Snow family in Snowball Edge Compute Optimized. We built this new flavor of Snowball Edge for use cases like advanced machine learning and full video motion. Starting over. And finally, we launched a new addition to the Snow family in AWS Snowball Edge Compute Optimized. We built this new flavor of Snowball Edge to complement the storage optimized version of Snowball Edge to take advantage of the increased compute capability for things like advanced machine learning and full motion video analysis in disconnected environments. You get twice the compute of the original storage optimized Snowball Edge, with the option to choose either 52 vCPUs or an NVIDIA G100 GPU along with 100 gigabyte per second networking. We think this will bring a new dimension to edge computing with this new compute capability coupled with the 42 terabytes of onboard storage in Snowball Edge Compute Optimized. And that will bring that'll also bring the capability to do some of those simple bulk uploads to S3 for longer term needs. So we've given you lots of different options for data transfer to fit any use case. And we've torn through a lot in the last little bit. I want to give you an opportunity to find some other content that will help you deep dive into some of the things that we talked about. You can find each one of these sessions that you see on these slides on YouTube. Just Google by the session number, and you'll be able to take a deep dive into any of the storage services that we talked about and a lot more from our AWS reInvent 2018 session catalog. So I appreciate you spending the time today, and look forward to working with you more in the future.